in any situation, when it's seemingly preferable or when it's uncomfortable, when we can't necessarily see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
He says, continually pray and give thanks in all of this because it's all a part of the plan.
Between the Grooves is hosted by James Curtis, music director and morning man in the Greater Toronto Area on Joy Radio. Hosts James Curtis talk to artists and industry insiders to discover the connection between music and faith. You can connect with the show at faithstrongtoday.com/Between the Grooves or via Twitter @BetweenGrooves.
Welcome to Between the Grooves, episode 223. It's your look at music, ministry, and everything in between with today's top Christian artists. It's been about 5 years now since we started this thing, and one of the guests that we had in our first year was Ayiesha Woods, and she is back with us today. Hi, Ayiesha.
Hi, it's so good to be back with you. How you doing?
I'm doing good. This whole thing probably started over coffee, just having conversations with people, and it really hasn't stopped, although I will say that my coffee cup this morning has a small little leak. I've got it on some paper towel right now just so it doesn't leak onto the table here, but other than that, yeah, I enjoy my coffee, and I understand you're not a coffee drinker.
You know what? I've been working at a church for the last 3 years, and ever since I've been here, I've graduated. And
graduated from coffee? I didn't realize. No. I didn't realize there was a graduation for that.
I graduated to coffee.
Oh, okay.
So now I have a cup of coffee maybe twice a week.
Okay.
And I enjoy my coffee. So kudos to all the coffee drinkers. I like to have what I've heard some people say, I like to have coffee with my cream.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I like it creamy and I like it sweet. So
exactly the same thing for me. And coffee, and I've said this before too, coffee for me is conversation. I don't really, I'll drink a coffee on my own and I'll probably sip on it over a period of time, but I'd rather be sitting across the table or chatting with somebody while I'm drinking my coffee because it's I don't know, it does more for me,
Mm-hmm. Well, now I know what to shoot you for Christmas or something or your birthday. You need a tumbler because you can't be having coffee cups with little leaks.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually have some Between the Grooves cups, but I've got one and I haven't used it because my wife would kill me if I say this because I always say it, but I'm saving it, and I don't want to dirty it, And then the other thing too is I got to wash it every time I use it, whereas a coffee cup from the coffee shop is just you drink it and you're done and you throw it in the garbage, right? So
well, that's true.
Not good for recycling, but what can I say? So you mentioned that you're doing some stuff at a church, and obviously for those that don't know who Ayiesha Woods is, you're a Christian artist. You were originally signed with Toby Mac's label, and
yes.
you had some radio airplay on some songs way back when, but also recently as well. Tell us what's happened. I mean, in the last 5 years since we chatted last, there's a lot that's happened in our world with the pandemic and everything else. But also a music career and a family isn't simple, right? It's it's a lot of work, and you got to kind of do a juggling act. It's a lot of balancing, isn't it?
Oh yes, a whole lot of balancing, and for me, I think the added challenge has been taking on a full-time position as music director and worship leader at a church. And so balancing home life, work, and ministry and professional artistry, like all at the same time, it definitely has been a balancing act, to say the least. But thank God that through his grace, like it's definitely not a walk in the park.
Right. You've
but
done
it's doable.
You've done a little bit of it backwards, and I say that because there's a lot of worship pastors that start ministry in a church, and then from there they start writing music, or perhaps they were already writing music, but they start taking their music and recording the music and releasing the music. Whereas you weren't even, employed in a church or doing that. You were just an artist. You were just a singer, songwriter, and you were already doing all that stuff.
Right, it's really interesting that that you pointed that out, because I never really thought of it that way, but it is the truth. And I think that having children played a major role in that transition for me. And I'm coming to learn and appreciate that God just moves in every season of our lives.
Yeah.
And really life is just all about seasons, and really embracing the season that you're in and making the most of it. And man, it's an interesting dynamic, but through him we can do all things, right?
Yeah. Speaking of seasons, it's interesting because that's exactly what happened with me way back when. I studied radio in school, and I worked in radio for a very short time. There's not a ton of money to be made in radio unless this mega star or whatever.
Right.
And so I left radio. I basically couldn't afford it. I was in debt. And I decided, I need to make some money. So I actually went out and got, good jobs, made some really good money over the years, got married, had kids, bought a house and everything else. And really the only thing that kind of got me, there's a number of factors, but one of the things that got me back into radio was not having any debt load or not having any huge expenses, so I could afford to make a little less money doing what I loved. Right?
That's it.
And
purpose.
so you talk about purpose, but you talk about the dynamics, and you talk about God's timing. That is all in a nutshell. That's what happened to me as well.
That's awesome. I was just reading a scripture, and it has been like, it has spoken life to me over the years. And I came across it again this morning, and it's in 1 Thessalonians, the 5th chapter, and starting at the 16th verse. And it says, "Rejoice always, pray continually, and in everything give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you." And I'm like, okay, God, so you're telling me always rejoice in every single season, in any situation, when it's seemingly preferable or favorable, or when it's uncomfortable, and not so great, when we can't necessarily see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
He says, continually pray and give thanks in all of this, because it's all a part of the plan. Like, it's all a part of the purpose.
That is so tough to do. It really is. Like I tell you about, the fact that I had some good jobs that paid very well, but I didn't like the jobs necessily. There were some jobs I couldn't stand doing. I couldn't stand the hours. I couldn't stand the fact that I was on call, and my wife knew that I just, detested some of these jobs.
Wow.
And so again, in those seasons, you still have to rejoice. I was thankful I had a job. I was thankful that I could provide for my family, but was I enjoying what I was doing? Not really.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
Golly. Yeah, it can be a little tough at times.
So your kids are young, and you are doing a lot of this juggling that you're doing right now. So how has that impacted your music career? Not the ministry part of being the worship pastor, but your career as a solo artist. Well,
I have been independent for the better part of my career, and having kids has definitely added great value. But from a songwriter's perspective, you want to talk about inspiration like none other. Be married and have children.
Right.
And you can write albums until Jesus comes again.
Right. Except you still need to find the time to do that. And that's difficult when you have a family and responsibilities like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very true. And another thing that I'm learning, even in this season, I work 4 days out of the week at the church, and thankfully, the church has an academy so that the boys go to school here. So we all come at the same time, and every morning that I come in, I drop them off, and the first thing I do is have my quiet time. And I spend my time with God, and I just, I'm like, God, is there something that you want to speak to me today? Or what can I learn from your word? I'll just slot out about an hour, and just maintaining that discipline has helped me keep everything in the proper perspective.
That's amazing that you get an hour.
Yeah.
The fact you get an hour is amazing, because I my quiet time is when I get up in the morning. So I'm at the radio station usually by about 4:45 in the morning, because I do the morning show. My alarm is set, and this drives my wife nuts, but my alarm is set for 2:00 in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
Now, I go to bed earlier. I go to bed by 7 p.m., so don't call me after 7. Actually,
okay, I'll remember that.
My phone goes on Do Not Disturb automatically at a certain time, and it's on vibrate or whatever else. But I get up at 2:00, and part of the reason for that is because I'm a morning person, and that's my quiet time. So, I'm brushing my teeth, showering, and eating and everything else, but I'm also I'm jumping on social media, check out what's going on. Is there anything I missed overnight? What about the scores from last night in hockey or baseball? Or basketball or whatever else. So it's catching up a little bit, but that's my quiet time. So if somebody's up at that time and disturbing me, it's really annoying.
Right. But I can imagine.
But it's not an hour. It's not an hour like you. Like I cannot believe, and my kids are older than yours, so I don't know how you're able to get this hour. That's just incredible.
No, let me tell you, I that's the time that I've slated. Does it always go to an hour? Not always. Sometimes it'll be 30 minutes. Sometimes it'll be 25, or sometimes it'll be 45 minutes. But I've slated that time. Okay. And some days are better than others.
Right. Yeah. The emails start coming in, or the phone starts ringing. I understand.
Right.
Yeah. So let's talk, I guess, a little bit about the career standpoint. So you're basically busy 4 days a week. When do you find time to write, or is that during that 1 hour time as well?
Actually, when I find time to write, it typically hits me at times that are not my slated time, my quiet time. Like I could be cooking dinner or getting the boys ready for bed or something, and a theme or something would just come to mind, or God will just drop something in my spirit, and right there I'll drop everything and head to either to the keyboard or piano, or I'll write down the lyrics that are dancing around in my head. Right. And it comes different ways, different times. Sometimes I'll be driving on my way to the church in the morning, and something will just drop in my spirit, and I'll write it, and I'll come back to it. But the writing definitely is ongoing, and I try to. I won't say I try to. I hope that God will continue to give me things to write about. And there's definitely no shortage.
I find my creative times or my inspirational moments are either when I'm in the shower or unfortunately, if it's not that morning time, that time that I've carved out, it'll be in the middle of the night. And that's the one I don't like, because it happened to me this past week where I had all these ideas floating through my brain, and I'm up in the middle of the night what's now going through my mind is how am I going to remember all this stuff?
You got to write that stuff down.
Well, my wife said, just keep a pad beside the bed. But
Yep.
I've heard stories about people that do that and they write something down and then they look at it in the morning. They have no clue what they wrote down, So I try to have some keywords of each point that I thought of. And then I just try to remember those keywords. And hopefully there's not more than 5 because after that, it's just, I can't remember anymore. And then the next morning when I am up, I'm going to scramble to write all this stuff down so I don't forget. And so this past week when it happened to me, I think I remembered everything except one point, and then like half a day later, it's like, oh, that's right, that happened as well. So I quickly wrote that down.
Good.
But if it happens in the middle of the night, that's the worst time for me because I'd rather be sleeping. Thank you very much.
Right. I mean, of course, middle of the night for you is probably 10 o'clock.
Yeah, there's still noise in the house. The rest of my family's still awake. In fact, it's funny because my son is a night owl. And sometimes he has later work shifts as well. And so I've said that there's always somebody awake in my house. And what I mean by that is normally he's up till probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, might even stay up later if he knew that I wasn't getting up or something like that. But typically he's up till about 1 o'clock in the morning. And then an hour later, I'm up and then he's fast asleep. And then by the time I get home from work, he's deciding to wake up or something like that. It's a really odd season, talking that word season again. It's a really odd season in my family. It really is. But
wow,
I still wouldn't trade it. I'd still enjoy the fact that there's somebody always awake. But as an example, I was doing some stuff for my daughter. We're planning a trip soon, and I have to update her passport. So she's busy in university right now, and she's got a crazy busy schedule with university. And so I'm the guy that's organized and meticulous about stuff. So I start getting this passport application going, and so I do everything I know, all the information I know about her. But there's some things I don't, like I didn't know her height, her exact height. I didn't know what's the actual course called that she's taking at university, like the overall name of it. I didn't know that. I knew kind of what she was studying, but I don't know the actual term for it. So I
did it eat you up?
No. I just printed everything I did know and highlighted the parts that I didn't know, and then I sent her a text saying, "When you get a second, can you fill in the rest?" Because by the time she gets home from school, from university, I'm going off to bed. Right?
See.
So you try to have this. So I mean, I'm very thankful for technology and texting and FaceTime and phone calls and everything else and emails for that matter, because I don't know how I would be able to do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't see her at all or be able to communicate with her until the weekend. And then on the weekend, she's got full-time hours working at the grocery store. So even then, it's a crazy busy schedule. So the fact that your kids are young. I'm a little bit envious, but I've also been there and I enjoyed those years and I still enjoy these years too. So
sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I was just having a conversation with my husband maybe 2 nights ago, and we were talking about the importance of putting that time in and making that investment. Because just like your daughter is in university now, it feels like just yesterday that our boys were just coming on the scene, and they're the 10, 8, 5, and a year and a half now. And I'm like, for the little one, like it seems like you just got here and now you're running around and saying all kinds of stuff and doing all kinds of things. And it's like, man, you don't get that time back. So you make the most of it and just really have an appreciation, a greater appreciation.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because we're pretty good at taking pictures as the kids have gotten bigger and stuff. So whether it be family pictures or even school pictures or whatever, good about taking the pictures, not really good about doing anything with the pictures. Posting it online or putting it in a frame or whatever else. So my wife a few weeks back decided, she's got all these frames that she bought at the store, but she never put pictures in them. So she decided she was going to take on this project. And so on our dining room table right now, there's a bunch of school pictures. And there's one of our kids when they were really young, and I'm passing by the table, and every day I pass by this table, I'm looking at saying, yeah, I remember that kid.
Wow.
Because
My
they're totally
goodness.
different people now, but you still,
Right.
I remember those years, that's kind of nice,
That's special.
Yeah.
I think probably a couple thousand pictures
Yeah.
just from last year alone. And I'm like, oh, thank God for iCloud.
Yeah. Yeah, that and memory sticks and computer hard drives and everything else. Yeah, that's for sure. I've actually started saving some stuff off onto USB sticks and just setting it aside in a safe place because I don't want to not take pictures because I don't have room on my phone or on my computer or anything else. I'll just save them off and then delete them off the computer in case the computer ever dies. I don't want to lose all that data as well. So I just kind of save it off separately, so I've got it down the road. And of course, a lot of that's ammunition for when the kids get married too, right? Oh, yeah. So how long have you been married?
We've been married for, come November, will be 12 years. But I've known my husband for 20 years, 21 years.
It took him a while, I guess. It took him a while to come around.
It took me a while to come around. He was amazing, and he waited for me. And I thank God for him all the time. We were friends, and he had to hear all about all the losers that that didn't make it.
That didn't make the short list, yeah. Great.
Like I'd call him and talk to him and tell him all about, this issue or this problem or this circumstance. And he'd just pray with me. He'd talk to me and just be a listening ear and just an amazing friend. And then it was toward the end of the year in 2009. And he sort of gave me an ultimatum. He was
Good for him. Absolutely.
Yeah. I was like, let's just be friends, And he was like, you have enough friends.
Yeah. I'm tired of waiting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's crazy because I was like, okay, fine. Have a nice life. God bless you in everything that you do. I love you. And we parted ways. 2 weeks later, I called him up and I was like, I don't want to do life without you. So let's move forward. And and we did. And 2010, we got married. And it's been a journey. It's been a beautiful journey. Not always peaches and cream, of course. And marriage takes work, you know.
Yeah.
But I thank God because I wouldn't want to do it with anyone else.
Can he sing?
He can sing. My guy is like, he can sing. He can play drums. He can preach. He's a mean cook. And he's just an all around talented, wonderful person. And I still like to say he married up.
Of course. Now, I can sing. I used to lead worship in my church way back when, and I don't do tons of singing these days. I stepped down from leading worship mainly because I was destroying my voice singing all the time on a Sunday morning, and so I thought, I can't be talking for a living and singing. So one of these days, you and I'll have to do something.
That would be
do a song
fun.
or something. I'll do the harmony. You can sing the lead. You'll be better at that. But I love singing that tenor part, and I'll destroy my voice to sing with you. How's that?
All right, let's go.
My wife cannot sing, but that's okay. I forgive her for that. My daughter has some musical ability. My son does not. But again, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the fact that he can speak. Now, I've never been much of a public speaker. I was always that shy kid in school that when I got called upon by the teacher, my face would get red and I would tear up and just be really embarrassed. So the fact that I'm in radio is a miracle as it is. But it's interesting
That's
because,
so awesome.
but it's interesting because I had a conversation with a friend of mine a week or two back. We were sitting down, having some coffee again, having a conversation, and we were talking about the fact, he knows I obviously work in radio, and I don't let that be part of our conversation generally because that's my job. That's not my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we did talk a little bit about it, and I was kind of using the analogy with him about my two brothers. So I've got one brother who's a pastor and one brother who's a teacher. And I said to him, we all have very similar careers. We're all public speakers. Right?
Sure.
But I said to him, I'm the dumb one. And he looked at me like, what do you mean? What do you mean?
What in the world?
But what I meant, and I explained that to him was, you've got my one brother who's a teacher and he does all his prep and then he teaches in front of a class of students and maybe there's 20 or 30 kids in the class. And he goes up there and he teaches and he'll take questions or whatever else. And then he gives assignments and marks the work and does exams and whatever else. My other brother's a pastor and he does something very similar where he does all of his prep work and then he goes up to speak on a Sunday morning and he'll be talking for, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes, and then he's done. Whereas me, working in radio, I've got to take all of that and shrink it down to 2 minutes. Right? Because that's essentially what radio is, right? When you've got a morning show or any other kind of radio show for that matter, people are there wanting to listen to the music. And especially on my radio station, we have a lot of teaching programs. So they really don't want to listen to me talk all forever.
Wow.
They want to be listening to the music because there's lots of other teaching stuff happening. So it's interesting that we all have these similar careers, but I just got to shrink it down to a couple of minutes. So
you got to give them the condensed version.
Yeah. And so how do you condense something in a really short amount of time, which is what condensing is? How do you do that and still get the point across without wasting words or wasting time, I guess? And so that's always the dilemma in radio. It's all timing. It's like, what can I say in 20 seconds over a song intro that's relevant or meaningful or funny or something for the audience that relates to them? And so, that's interesting because this whole podcast thing, we've been doing it for 5 years now, but that was probably the scariest thing for me as a radio guy is, we decide we're going to do this podcast now and have conversations with artists and musicians and producers and marketing people. But how do I fill 30 minutes? Because I'm only used to talking for a couple. Right? And so I remember the first episode we ever had was like, I'm kind of thinking, how are we going to fill this? How are we going to fill this? Now it's easy now because I can talk nonstop, but it was really difficult. It was a big learning curve for me. I don't have difficulties having conversations with people. They could be the biggest star that is out there.
Right.
I've never had challenges speaking with people. I've in my previous life, non-radio life, I was, in a sales capacity, and I would have other sales people come to me because they were requested to have a meeting with the president of this customer. And they didn't know how to react or have conversation with a president of a company. And I'm looking at it saying, it's just another guy, or girl.
We put our pants on the same.
Everybody puts their pants on the same. They might drink coffee. They might drink tea. They've got their intention of what they want in a meeting or in this relationship, and I might have as well. So you kind of meet and figure out what they're all about. Like, no big deal. So I don't have a problem having a conversation with somebody.
It's your gift.
I suppose. I suppose. Again, for me, it was just filling at least 30 minutes. And the reason why I say 30 minutes for the people that are listening on this podcast version is that we've always had a radio edit. So the podcast might run 45 minutes or an hour or whatever, but we always have a condensed version, a radio edit, as they call it in the music world, a radio edit that goes on Joy Radio in Toronto. But that's got to be 30 minutes because that's the slot that they've carved out for us there. So just a thing there. So, yeah. So
tell me how it actually started.
The podcast itself, well, it was, it's interesting. It's been well over 5 years. It probably was 6 years ago when the thought first materialized. It was actually the gentleman who was our executive producer, Matt, had this idea. And part of the reason for the idea was because again, doing a morning show, music-focused morning show, not a lot of opportunity to talk. And I was in agreement with him as well, whereas I could have a conversation with an artist, but if it's going to be more than 3 to 5 minutes long, it really doesn't have a place on the morning show, right?
Got you. Yes.
So how can we have a longer form conversation? And that's kind of how that whole thing evolved. But the other thing I'll say is, in North America, and a lot in Canada as well, there's basically two kinds of Christian radio stations. Many radio stations are charitable organizations. They raise funds through direct donations, sometimes 1 or 2 fundraising drives throughout the year. They also get their business from church advertising and businesses. And then there are commercial radio stations, which is like our radio station. We rely on indirect support for ministry programs, which means there's a lot of spoken word, a lot of teaching and preaching, talk show type shows. And listeners can support those ministries directly, and indirectly, those ministries are supporting us. I've been at events. I've been at events representing the radio station, and I'll have somebody come up to me and say, "I'd like to give $20 to Joy," and I say, "Well, I can't accept that. I've got nothing to do with it. Like I can't take that $20 and put it towards anything. You take that $20 and support one of our ministry partners, and they in turn will support us." Right. So given the fact that we have a lot of spoken word, again, is that whole issue again with the morning show or the drive times in general, where we don't have the forum for these longer form interviews. And but how can we do that? How can we do that? And so that's kind of how that part started. We focus on music during the morning and afternoon drive times, as well as the overnights. There's the bunch of ministry programs throughout the day and the evening. So there wasn't much of an opportunity to air the longer form interviews, and that's the other reason why this whole thing started. And then it was just looking to see what kind of what kind of conversations we could have. And, you can have conversations with people that aren't even in the music business at all and go that direction. But we thought, let's go with the music direction, so that way we can still have conversations with artists. And we have a lot of our listeners of this show that are artists themselves or musicians or just people that admire some of these artists and musicians and people in the business and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of how the thing started, and it's just, that's cool. It hasn't stopped. In the beginning, it was kind of trying to pull teeth a little bit, trying to see if people were interested in coming on the show. It was something brand new.
I can imagine.
And podcasts weren't big back then. Like especially over the last couple of years, when people have been stuck at home. Well, everybody and their mother's got a podcast. But 5 years ago, there weren't a ton of podcasts out there. So how can we build something from the ground up? So a lot of people, were thinking, well, we're not going to get a lot of exposure on podcasts. Why would we want to be on it? So we were very successful in getting people onto the podcast, but it was a lot of work getting them on there in the first place.
I can imagine. And do you remember who your first interview was with?
Well, the first episode ever was my previous co-host Drew Brown and myself, just us chatting about what we expected to have on the show. And then, but the first actual interview, and I don't like using that word interview, but the first conversation, yeah. I believe it was Jamie Grace.
Oh, really?
I believe it was her. Now I'm almost certain it was her. We've had so many people. And the other thing too, and I take pride in this. I know you shouldn't have pride, but I take pride in the fact that we really haven't had many repeat guests. I could probably count them on 1 or 2 hands of how many people we've actually brought back. And part of the reason for that is it's easy to have a show where you just keep bringing back the same people over and over again.
Right.
But listeners, number one, would get tired of it. Unless there's something new they can contribute, what's the point? I think what people want to hear is lots of different ideas, lots of different people, lots of different content. And so we really strive to always get different people on. And if, I get requests all the time. Somebody that's been on the show would like to come back. And I usually look at it and say, well, has enough time passed since we had him on last? Is there anything new that we can talk about? Right?
So has enough time passed since we spoke last?
Well, it's only been 5 years. It's only been... And in fairness, a lot's happened in the past for you, and
Yes, certainly.
and we have talked a little bit between those 5 years, just not on the podcast. You know,
Right.
you've had music coming out. We've played the music. I remember.
Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. And I remember, I don't know all the details, but I remember it was probably, we have a feature called New Music Monday. So it was probably
Okay.
a song that you came out with, and we were doing social media plugs for it. So I would have contacted you or your team with regards to getting a picture of you so that we could use it for the social media. So I remember that distinctly. We've probably got
Cool
the
beans.
image somewhere there. But yeah, so it's not like we've been strangers. And that's the case for a lot of the people in this business anyways, where you might have somebody on the show where there's still stuff happening in the background, conversations happening in the background, or texts or
Yes.
direct messages or whatever else. So
Just relationships, man.
Yeah.
Just building on relationships and fostering them.
yeah. It's nice when you go to a concert or like one of the music festivals over the summertime, and you see a bunch of
Yes.
artists that you've talked to in the past, and they know who you are and you know who they
Right.
are, and you just nod at them. They know who you are, and you know, you don't have to have a lengthy conversation with them. Sometimes you do, or you just, hey, how you doing, Bob, or whatever, you know.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, that's always fun. as well.
Family.
Yeah, because really it is this big family. It's kind of your work family, I suppose. But and another part of it is not, because you're not necessarily having a conversation about work or during work, because it's off hours at home on the weekend or whatever else, right?
Right.
So you've got a little bit of a podcast thing going as well. You've got something you just started.
I do, and I'm pretty excited about it. It is peeling back the layers and really getting into just some truths, some fundamental truths. And the introductory podcast, the first episode, I was just explaining the fact that you mentioned pride. I was sharing how the Lord revealed to me an area of pride in my own life, and how I've operated in this pride for years in ministry and in my life and work and at home. And it's the underside of pride. I'm not one to boast about things that are going on in my life, or, you know, I don't get inflated easily. But I don't want people to highlight or spotlight my flaws. And so for me, it was realizing, excuse me, that that's the underside of pride. And the Lord was just like, listen, the things that you've gone through or that you go through, they can be used to help someone else. And
As long as you're still not living it.
right.
Yeah.
And I just had to get over myself, you know, and realize this thing is so much bigger than us, you know. And so that was the first episode of the podcast. And then the second one was about the importance of rest, you know. And I mean, God himself rested on the seventh day from all of his work.
I'm a fan of naps. I am. So
So just, you know, different things that we go through and we experience in our lives. And I'm just kind of digging deep and being as transparent as I can. I've got to record my next episode, and it's still a little baby. And I don't know, you know, where it may go or what it may do, but I'm just doing my part and let the Lord do his part. So.
And what's happening musically? Oh, sorry. I guess to take a step back, what's the name of the podcast again?
It is Wild, Crazy, Beautiful.
That reminds me of a song.
It is.
Is that the theme?
journey-
Is that the theme music of the podcast? Is that song?
It's not, and
Why not?
I need to. I really need to. Someone actually on my team mentioned that to me with the last episode, and I was like, you know what? I need to do that.
Okay,
So for the third episode,
So just so everybody knows, you have a song and it's called "Wild, Crazy, Beautiful," and that's what I was alluding to there. That's got to be the theme music. It just makes sense. The lyrics are right there, right? And you don't have to worry about copyright. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. You know.
Sure enough. It's a wild, crazy, beautiful adventure, you know?
Yeah. Well, life is anyways. But speaking of life, what's happening with your music life? What's happening with new music or albums or recording or writing? What's going on there?
Well, the writing has never stopped. We're constantly writing music, and we pre-produce a lot of our stuff, and we send it off to the big boys that can take it to the next level and have a finished product, if you will.
So are they more demos, and then you send it off and determine if it's going to be produced further from there?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I've got a meeting on Monday to go over the music for my next project, which we are, fingers crossed, hoping to release later this year.
Okay,
probably in the fall.
Here's a question for you, and this is because we have a lot of artists that listen to this show. Is your music, financially speaking, self-sustaining, or is it? There's artists out there that will write music and produce music and record it and everything else, and there's a cost involved to do all of that, and they will just consider this is kind of my love gift to people because they're not making any money at it. It's really a cost. Right. It's a cost center versus a profit center. So for you, is music actually at least break even?
You know what? Our last project, we broke even. This project coming up, I don't know what it will do. Being independent, you absorb all of the costs.
Yeah.
And so,
but if it's successful, you get all the profits.
You
too.
recoup, pretty much.
You can recoup it. Whereas if you're with a label, they would take a huge chunk of what would be made, but then you've got all the people behind you as well, right? So
right. And so, thankfully, we've had the honor of working with some great producers and people that we've worked with before. And so we get the independent rate, the independent artist rate. And we've developed relationships with a lot of these people. And I mean, don't get me wrong, everything still costs. But at the end of the day, if you're able to do what it is that you love to do, what you know that you're called to do, and be able to make any kind of money on it's well worth it.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's always tough in any family situation when you have kids, and as they get older, the costs seem to increase. And this economy that we're in right now isn't helpful, anyways, with inflation and the cost of gas and the cost of food and everything else. I have a home studio, and I was having some technical issues recently with one of my gadgets, if you want to call it that, one of the stuff that I have on the rack, and I was having a problem with it. So I do voiceover work on the side, and I was doing some voiceovers, and my kids were laughing at me because they could hear me in studio rereading some lines, and I was going check, and I was making sounds, just trying to isolate the problem, and they were making fun of me, and I said to them, that's fine. I understand it. It probably was funny to listen to, but you do realize that the money I make doing the voiceover work paid for your Christmas presents last year. So
So laugh all you want.
Yeah, exactly. So you do something that you enjoy. It's not necessarily, going to be a huge profit center for you if you've got a full-time job like a lot of artists do. But, keep doing what you're doing and enjoy doing what you're doing. If you can't have fun at your job, then why are you doing it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just posted the other day. We had a little day trip and went down to the beach, and we don't make a lot of money. We make a lot of memories.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so true.
And do matters most.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not all about the money, that's for sure. I'd rather go for a walk in the park in the summertime when the weather's gorgeous and whatever else, versus spending a ton of money going somewhere that something that costs money. I'd rather do the walk, not because I'm cheap, but because I really do enjoy it more than regretting after the fact that I spent all this money on something and I really didn't get what I thought I should get out of it. Right? So.
Oh, I hear you.
Yeah. So.
I packed lunches for the beach day.
Yeah.
We set up our little spot, had a beautiful spot, and the ocean is free.
Mm-hmm. Breeze
is free.
Just so everybody's clear, you're in Florida right now, and I'm in Toronto. Yes. So we have winter, we have snow on the ground, it's cold, and you're enjoying yourself at the beach. It's just not fair.
Let me see. I'm gonna pull up the temperature.
Oh,
I think
today. Don't. I don't want to hear it. I do not want to hear it. That's just not fair. That's just not fair.
Please let me tell you. Oh. Our highs are 82 today.
Okay, so 82 Fahrenheit, which is 28 Celsius. I just don't want to hear about it. Okay, I'm jealous. I'm jealous. Let me tell you.
Listen, the sun is shining in your heart. That's all that matters. Here we go. Listen, before we do go, one of the things that we do every episode is we always throw back to a previous guest, and we get their take on what the number one piece of advice that they would give to Christian artists, new or old. But instead of us doing that today, why don't we hear from you? Can you give us some advice that you would give that it's maybe it's a new artist that's just starting out and they don't have a clue what they're doing and they're just kind of going blind right now, or maybe it's a seasoned artist where they need to take a step back and realize that, hey, this is something really important that you should consider. What would that be in your mind? For me, the advice that I would give to whether it's, like you said, a seasoned artist or someone up and coming, first things first, make sure that you are in right relationship with the Father, because He's going to give the purpose. He's the only one that can really give purpose. And come hell or high water, as an artist, I've seen the best of times and I've seen the worst of times. But because I'm in personal relationship with Jesus, whatever the season has been for me, single, married, children, no children, whatever the season has been, I've been able to maintain because I understand my purpose in it all. So that would be the form of advice that I would give to anyone interested in music and as a career.
And really what you're saying there is it's not even specific to music anyways. It could be any career, right? It could be anything in your life that you really want to set out and do, whatever your passion is. Just make sure everything's in the right order. Everything's in the in God's will. Everything's in God's timing, because we talked about that as well today, and also in His purpose.
Yep, for sure.
Very good. Listen, I really enjoyed our conversation.
Ditto.
Yeah. How would you like to come back once in a while to chat with some other guests in the future?
I'd love that.
Be a lot of fun.
would.
Yeah, be a lot of fun. With technology these days, we can do anything. You're in Florida. I'm in Toronto. Let's make it happen. Listen, thank you very much for tuning into the show today. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast for new episodes all the time. You can also leave us a rating and a review. It just helps us reach more people. You can subscribe on your favorite app, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or iHeartRadio. Don't forget, you can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Leave a comment there, and we can keep the conversation going. Thanks for checking us out on Between the Grooves.